Well, thank you so much for sticking and staying with us on GH today. And we'll go quickly into another interview. And this time around, we'll be looking at issues also still on Galamsey among a plethora of other issues. And we've been joined via Zoom. Dr. Arthur Kennedy has joined us via Zoom all the way from the United States of America. We'll be talking about particularly Galamsey and its effects and issues. He's also raised some concerns on the menace and our fight, basically, as a country. Dr. Arthur Kennedy has joined us via Zoom. And Doc, thank you so much for your time this morning. I hope you're doing very well.
I'm doing well. Good morning to your viewers.
Fantastic. So, I mean, the issue of Galamsey has become topical once again. Here we are talking about the state of our water bodies, looking at exactly what has happened to them as a result of illegal mining activities, and looking at the government's fight. What would be your assessment primarily of the government's fight? President Akufo-Addo noted that he was putting his presidency on the line to tackle this menace.
Well, that promise was long on words and short on delivery. In fact, when the president made that pledge, I was very excited. And I reached a Ghanaian journalist who has not given me permission to name him, so I would keep his name private. He told me that he was very confident that the president's pledge will not amount to anything. And I asked why. He said because there are too many powerful people, both in his family and his party, involved in Galamsey. And to quote the person, Nada does not have the balls to deal with those people. In actual fact, he bet me $100. So I figured that next time I see him and on my return to Ghana, I owe him $100. I was very sure the president was going to do something, and nothing happened. In actual fact, since that pledge was made, the only serious effort that was made was the interministerial committee led by Professor Frimpong Boateng. And my own theory is that because the professor didn't have enough support from the government, his efforts didn't make that much of an impact, but it made enough of an impact for the NDC to exploit it for the 2020 election, which the MPP almost lost. I think the lesson that was taken from that defeat by the MPP was that Galamsey was a losing issue. And the NDC also felt that it was a winning issue. So it became what in American parlance would be called the third rail of politics. It means you touch it and you die. So because of that, I am convinced that in actual fact, neither political party will solve Galamsey. They are both too embedded in it. They make too much of their money from it. The Galamsey forces have become too powerful that in order to solve Galamsey, it must be depoliticized. And for now, if you ask me about what the government has been doing, I would just say its efforts have been very inadequate and woeful. And to even say the government is solving it is even false. I think the government, as at now, is involved actively in promoting Galamsey. There are too many government officials who are involved in Galamsey to say that the government is fighting. It is not fighting.
But we've seen measures put in place by the government, Operation Vanguard, Operation Halt, Operation Hawk 2, this, and then quite a plethora of those issues, those mechanisms have been rolled out. And the argument is that, well, these measures that were rolled out were countered by political comments made by the opposition NDC for people who were arrested practicing Galamsey or involved in Galamsey, the promise to release them. And that is what really puts spokes in the wheels of the fight.
Not really. I mean, the government itself released Aisha Wang. A lot of the Chinese who were arrested disappeared. All those things were not the makings of the opposition. But having said that, I think the fundamental thing that the government is not admitting. It's not really that the NDC people are commenting on it. After all, they don't have power. They don't control the military. They don't control the police. The fact of the matter is that powerful functionaries in the government are neck deep in the Galamsey process. And actually, just last week, Speaker Babin did say in Parliament that the MPs who are involved in Galamsey should stop it. And in private communication, he told me that he's been making efforts to try and solve the problem. I think the bottom line is that Galamsey has become so powerful that neither political party by itself is powerful enough or committed enough or patriotic enough to address it.
How do we stamp this menace and deal with it? Because we've had people like Otumfuo, some chiefs who were found complicit or to be involved in Galamsey in one way or the other. Like you mentioned rightly, Speaker Bagmin last week mentioned that some MPs were also beneficiaries and were directly or indirectly involved in the Galamsey menace. So if these two, at least these two people have a fair idea of people engaged in Galamsey, why are we then not able to tackle it? You mentioned that, yes, some government officials are too neck deep in it, and that makes it difficult. But in the long run, why are we not able to mention names to be able to deal with the menace?
Because the people doing it are too powerful, and those who are trying to fight it are tokens who have realized that Galamsey has become one of the major funders of our political activities. But let me even widen it and take it out of the realm of politics. The truth of the matter is that Galamsey produces a lot of money, and Galamsey, in effect, is the apogee of the system that has been gradually growing, in which the philosophy of our governance has become the organized transfer of public wealth into private hands. All this gold that is being mined, it belongs to all of us, but they are not being mined so that we can fill the public coffers with revenue. They are being mined for private interests. All this water that is being polluted and are being salvaged by the Ghana Water and Sewerage Corporation for all of us to drink, the extra costs have been borne by the public. And it goes to my point that the state has become impotent and is collapsing in the face of powerful private interests, which are led most of the time by very prominent people in our government. So yes, all those efforts are being made, but I am just telling you here that it is my very carefully considered judgment that neither political party will solve Galamsey, that if we all don't act to solve it, someday we will see pitched battles in our villages or in our streets by people who are finally fed up by the destruction of their environment and destruction of their life that they see in front of them, and they will conclude that the government will not do anything, so they should fight it themselves.
So how then do we fight this? Because quite strangely, when you look at the polls that have been conducted, Global Info Analytics polls, among others, and what would determine the choice people make on December 7, Galamsey doesn't seem to feature prominently. People talk about economy, infrastructure, and among others. So how then do we deal with this if people really do not see that as basis for their choice in their elections?
Well, people deal with what is in front of them. Of course, Galamsey is a menace that would eventually affect all of us, but not all communities see the Galamsey menace. So if you talk, for example, about educating people through SHS, while you are giving their younger brothers or their sisters mercury to drink in the villages so that they will give birth to deformed children, then your commitment to the future of the country is questionable. If you talk about 24-hour economy and we are destroying our villages at record levels and contaminating our environment, then that promise is hollow. But the reason why the political parties are not focused on it is that they know within their hearts that they cannot solve it. I think that Galamsey matters more than most of the issues being discussed in our campaigns. And all those other issues are important, but they become secondary when you talk about what most of us would agree is an existential threat. The other thing is also that, in actual fact, the media, people like you and others who should actually highlight it, with few exceptions, like the very bold and courageous reporting by Joy News' Erastus Asardonko and others, have been brought into silence. Their silence have been bought. And I tell all of you Ghanaians that to save our country and to build our country, we need courage, and sometimes we need sacrifice. You know, I tell people that even though there were 12 Caesars, the most celebrated Roman of them all was Cato, who was called the last Roman citizen who would go on to inspire people like Patrick Henry when they said, give me liberty or give me death. And across Africa, there was Ojinja Odinga, who resigned as vice president in order to write the famous Not Yet Uhuru. In South Africa, there is Tula Madonsela, who took on Zuma of her own party. There is Nuhu Ribadu in Nigeria. And when you come to Ghana in our history, Abolitians Rights Protection Society, there were lawyers who put their fortunes on the line to go and fight for us. Nkrumah had Peduaso Lodge built for him, but he felt it should belong to the state. Aban refused to go along with Achampong. Azukrab exposed the murder of the judges. Those from Pont Boateng did what he could in the Galamsey fight that we are talking about. Martin Amidu tried to expose what they call Woyome's scandal. Those are the kinds of citizenships and acts that we need to support and encourage if we hope to build the country that the Fremamo was talking about when he talked about general assassination, and we think about when we sing God bless our homeland Ghana. I am telling you sincerely that where we sit, if we don't do something, all what the campaigning is about and all that will amount to naught, because the very existence and legitimacy of our state is being questioned. On Joy News file, a security official said he went to one of these Galamsey places, and the Galamsey people were better armed than he was. You know, the weapons that the official security people took there were not as good as those of the Galamsey. And I ask all Ghanaians to think about it. China produces more gold than any other country in the world. America is in the top 5. South Africa produces more gold. Why are all their environments not being destroyed like ours? And all these things are being done, and the state is seeing no benefit from these things.
And it's quite worrying, because if the politicians will not lead the charge, how about our chiefs? I mean, like I said earlier, we've seen people like Otumfuo distill some chiefs and all of that. What do you make of those approaches to also dealing with the menace? Because this menace is happening in the various communities where there are chiefs, there are DCEs. At the local level, how can we strengthen the mechanisms to deal with it?
I don't think the local level people are powerful enough to deal with it. They can help. But upon very careful consideration, I think that since we are still a democracy, until we decide that Galamsey is more important than our democracy, and then we should solve it outside the democratic process, I think this is what we should do. I think that the Asantehene, along the lines of what he did to solve the Dabon crisis and to avert violence in a couple of our elections, should convene a summit. That summit should involve both presidential candidates or their representatives to negotiate, both chairman of our two major political parties, the majority and minority leader, the speaker, a representative from the security services, and a representative from the Minerals Commission, with Professor Frimpong Boateng and Solomon Owusu as technical consultants. And they should come up with a deal whose outline should involve the banning outright of Galamsey, whether it is small-scale mining or core Galamsey, for a 5-year period. Secondly, we should put to the exploitation of our forest reserves for the next decade, period. Then we should hammer the outlines of a deal that will involve all those who have legitimate claims on the government, involving what is it that they've lost if they've been given land to mine, showing us the receipts of what they have mined and the taxes they paid so that they've made whole, and allowing the environment to recover, and Parliament passing this deal by a unanimous void vote with at least a 2/3 majority, which will go into effect before the election, because I have no doubt that none of our political parties on their own have the balls to solve this. I think that Asantehene has the credibility, based on some of the things he's done and said now and in the past, to call such a meet, a gathering. I think that there are people of goodwill in our system, like Speaker Babin, like Professor Frimpong Boateng, like Solomon Owusu. I think that in the security forces, the people I've been talking to have told me that there is a lot of frustration, and they too, as patriotic Ghanaians, can see that our country is being destroyed. If we do this and we solve this problem so that we can take it off the table, we can have an honest election campaign, because I do not think that a debate about Galamsey during this campaign will solve Galamsey.
And we have the Lands and Natural Resources Minister convening a meeting of all regional ministers to do what he has described as a declaration of a second world war on Galamsey. Do you think that would have any impact whatsoever?
No, it won't, because we had an interministerial committee that had about 8 cabinet ministers. And if you look at Frimpong Boateng's report, most of them even stopped attending his meeting. He complained to the president, who did nothing. So I do not see how convening regional ministers who do not even have the authority of cabinet ministers to declare a war will do anything. This is electioneering politics, and the minister is not serious. And every serious Ghanaian knows that.
For you, that really would not do anything. It's just for the optics.
Absolutely. And you know it, and I know it. If an interministerial committee couldn't do anything, why would convening regional ministers who serve at the behest of the president, who himself is an agent of Galamsey, going to make any difference? It's not going to make.
You call the president an agent of Galamsey?
Yes, I did. And I do that very confidently. There is no way the level of destruction of our environment and water bodies would go on without the president's connivance, either by omission or commission. The president is morally culpable for what we are witnessing. So when he put his president on the line to fight Galamsey, the presidency was on the line, at least in the judgment of history, and he has failed.
Quite interesting. Quite interesting. But moving away from the subject of Galamsey, I remember having a conversation with you like this when Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh was nominated as the running mate to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. You had your concerns then. Has anything changed for you, looking at how he's also conducted himself on the campaign trail?
No, nothing has changed. And in fairness, I think that, like I said then, none of us is perfect. And in actual fact, yes, he has said some unfortunate things, but even his boss has said more unfortunate things, like when he was asked why he hasn't implemented some of the solutions he's been advocating, he laughed and said, "What would I do if I'm elected if I do all those things now?" That was even more serious than what Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh said, and they asked him things about some of the things he said about the dollar and other things he said that was campaigning. So I think that Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh could have said things better. Kwame Nkrumah is and would always be, for the foreseeable future, our best president. despite his faults, and he's not Kwame Nkrumah. He's our Kwame Nkrumah. But having said that, I think that none of us is perfect, so we should let Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh move on. He's a minor factor in this campaign.
Right. So talking about the presidency, for instance, President Akufo-Addo yesterday at the Ghana Bar Conference, he spoke there, and we were told, still on the issue of Galamsey though, the Attorney General said that about 857 people are currently being investigated for illegal mining in about 152 cases, I believe, and some convictions have been done. For you, does that send the right signal, even with the issue of Galamsey?
No, it doesn't. I mean, when they released Aisha Wang and Safu Mahfouz said that prosecuting her will not benefit anybody, and if you drive, from Kumasi to Obuasi and see all the Chinese who are taking over our country and destroying it through pollution, while their countries' water bodies and environments are pristine, they are not serious. This government cannot and will not solve Galamsey because it is not fighting it, it is engaged in
it. Despite the prosecutions that we are told are ongoing, you're not convinced?
How many people have been convicted? How many Chinese have served jail terms? How many of them have been deported? I mean, how much of our forests have been reclaimed? How many water bodies have been saved? Since Frimpong Boateng left, what strides have been made? What do you think all those big Chanson machines, how did they get into the country? Through bush paths? They are being imported, so don't let anybody throw dust into your eyes. This government is part of Galamsey Incorporated, fully.
And talking about Professor Frimpong Boateng, I mean, the document that came to public light was described as half-truths by the administration, for which reason we did not see much action taken on that. Do you think that if we had really taken that seriously, perhaps that would have aided the fight?
Oh, of course. The president says, of course, he allows the document to sit on his desk for 2 years without doing anything. Then after public attention is drawn to it, he belatedly orders an investigation of the document. And then while the investigation is being conducted, his office releases a statement describing the document as half-truths and etc. How would they know when the investigation has not been completed? That shows that the president was acting in bad faith. And of course, it begs the question of whether such an explosive report sat on his desk for 2 years. Not only that, the report alleges, and nobody has contradicted it, that relatives of the president were reaching out to the Interministerial Committee to ask them to show favoritism to people connected with them in the Galamsey business. So far, fundamentally, Frimpong Boateng's allegations have not been debunked. And even if you were in doubt about Frimpong Boateng, forget about him. What about the documentaries produced by Erastus Asarodonko? I thought that was very brave reporting, and he deserves an award. And if that didn't move anybody in this country, I don't know what else will move them. But Professor Frimpong Boateng is a great man. He was the only member of that interministerial committee who took that job seriously. He was trying to do something about Galamsey, and it is ironic that, as we have done repeatedly in our history, the people who stand up for our principles are those that we victimize. And all the time we sit on the streets and we say, oh, we want honest leaders, we want principled leaders. We don't. Whenever they come up and they are being victimized by the forces of evil, we all stand on the side because we want our 30 pieces of silver. You'll be amazed at how many people, even in this government, agree with all the criticisms that I make privately. But of course, in public, they will defend the government because that is how they get their 30 pieces of silver. And as I said in my opinion piece, what are they going to do with money? 80-year-olds destroying their country so they will have money. To do what?
saw that for you, it was quite instructive then when the GBA president yesterday at the bar conference told the president, well, he should be able to deal with the big names behind illegal mining in the country. That was very instructive.
Of course, and the GBA came late to the fight. You know, when they were doing all those things they did to Frimpong Boateng and others, the GBA should have raised their voices in their defense, just like the Ghana Medical Association and all these other people. It is late, but his admonition was welcome. And of course, if the president cannot deal with the big people in his own government doing Galamsey, how is he going to deal with other people outside the government? So the president has failed completely on Galamsey. And by the way, at the Bar Association conference, he was lamenting about the fact that people are trying to portray his family as corrupt. His family is corrupt. You know, the evidence is all around us. And that man, historically, would have been better off if he had never been president. He promised to protect the public purse, and he has pillaged it mercilessly.
So for you, it's not a portrayal, it is the reality. And the president even talking about the fact that, well...
It's not for me, for us. You are a journalist, you are a reporter. I mean, how do you lead a government in which when we say that we're going to do COVID tests at the airport, we can give a contract to somebody who doesn't even have a license to operate a business in Ghana to do COVID tests at the airport, and then when the ministers involved go for confirmation hearings in Parliament, none of them can explain how the person got the contract. How do you explain how when we get $3 billion in COVID money from external sources, the government
Right. We apologize there. We'll try to reestablish contact with Dr. Arthur Kennedy and continue the conversation for you. But it's quite instructive, some of the comments he is making. Clearly, very dissatisfied with the government's fight and approach towards illegal mining, also known as Galamsey here in the country. Says that the president has failed completely, among others. Dr. Arthur Kennedy has joined us. We have re-established contact with him. Doc, sorry, we lost you there, but you were basically telling us about the tag of corruption and why it is clear that the president himself cannot absolve himself of blame in terms of the issues of corruption that have bedeviled the country.
Yes, I said, I don't know which part we lost, but I said that looking, for example, at awarding COVID airport contract to somebody who didn't even have a license to operate a business in the country. I mean, deciding that the best way to share COVID money for mitigation is to give it to party functionaries. Those are, by definition, acts of corruption. And I believe, deep down in my heart, that a president cannot just be against corruption. He must get up every day and fight it. And this president has not gotten up and fought corruption. He has aided and abetted. I can say, for example, that President Mills and President Liman had corruption under their government, but they were not personally corrupt. I am not comfortable in saying the same thing about President Akufo-Addo.
And so what do you make of his assertion that, well, Ghanaians will still prefer a clearing agent tag to a government official one in reference to John Dramani Mahama of the NDC? Yeah,
but isn't that the ultimate confession? In other words, I am a thief, but my opponent is a bigger thief. I mean, really, is that what it has come to? From I will protect the public purse to, okay, I'm a clearing agent by his government official one. Who says that? I mean, that in itself is a Freudian confession that he has led a corrupt administration.
And what about his comments on free senior high school, which was basically the trump card for the NPP in 2016? And he says that, well, for those who are asking for a review of the policy to enable those who have powers to pay well, he's totally against that. And if you have the resources to pay, make sure that's where the private schools are there for.
He is wrong as usual on that, as he is on most other things. First, people take their kids to public schools because sometimes the public schools are the best institutions. And in addition to just being the best institutions, it is also the melting pot of different ethnic groups and others. So in my view, Achimota, Presby Boys, Prempe College, Infantipem, Adisada, etc. I don't see which kind of private schools will be better than them. But having said that, the president misses the point. The point is that those who are going to these public schools and enjoying free SHS and have the means to pay for it. I think that the fatal flaw in the free SHS initiative is that we maintained our boarding school systems. I think most of them should be day schools. And I believe that given my experience here in the US, Accra, Kumasi, Cape Coast, Takoradi, and a lot of the cities who have 80 to 90% of students being day students with public buses and passes to ride these buses that will pick them up in the morning, bring them back home in the evening. And then, of course, if I decide that I live in Kumasi, but I went to Presby Boys, so my kid should go to Presec and be in the boarding school, then I should pay for it. In the US, most of our high schools are public schools, and most of the kids stay home and go to these schools. And I'm surprised that the Minister of Education, who has been in the educational system here, didn't know that. The reason why the free SHS system is unsustainable is that it's too expensive. We just can't afford it. And eventually that will become obvious. And of course, since we can't afford it, it is affecting the quality of the education. We can't feed them well enough. The accommodation is overstretched. There are not enough teachers. And if we had been more cautious and done most of this as day schools, we will be in a better position to implement what doubtless is a very good policy initiative.
So for you, the free SHS in its current form cannot be sustained, even though we've heard from John Dramani Mahama of the NDC saying that, well, as it stands now, free senior high school has come to stay. He will just consider some reviews there. You believe that it's not sustainable because of the cost factor?
Yeah, it's not sustainable, and the reviews must include finding ways to means test those who are going and to give more people the chance to stay at home while going to the SHS schools. It's a good idea, but it was badly implemented, which is what we do most policies in Ghana.
Right. So, December 7, Ghanaians will be going to the polls again to elect a leader. And people have said, clearly it's between Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and then John Dramani Mahama. But what for you should be the deciding factor for Ghanaians as they go to the polls?
The deciding factor should be who is concerned most about Ghana. It should be who would. I think that basically of course, I am hoping, like I've told you earlier, that we can solve Galamsey and take it off the table. But if we took Galamsey off the table, the central issue is corruption, followed by competence and followed by jobs.
Very well. Dr. Arthur Kennedy, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate your time with us.
Yes.
So you heard Dr. Arthur Kennedy. He is a founding member of the New Patriotic Party, currently residing in the United States of America, sharing his thoughts on some pertinent issues, including Galamsey, free senior high school corruption, among others. And out of the curtains on GH Today Radio on GHOne television. Thank you so much for keeping me company from 6 till date. We thank you so much for your time, and let's repeat same tomorrow right here on GHOne television. I am Joshua Kodjo Mensah.